Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's edition of Read T-Post, where I take old stories of narrated and update into modern audio standards. This particular story is called Tank Pummeling, written by Eurowin. Here she was, at the bar again. Honed stared glumly into her mug before taking a few large gulps of the bitter brew, trying to shake off her familiar feeling of despondency that kept trying to creep in upon her. Her entire squad had been destroyed, not in a valiant combat, but in a careless accident that had seen an explosive device primed and ticking when it shouldn't have been. Flashes of memory came without prompting. The deep, bass-filled note of the blast, the shock of suddenly flying through the air in a place she had up until that point considered safe, the all-too-brief thought to her squad mates, her friends, and their status. And, just before her consciousness, the brief, sickening crack of her own body as it whipped without mercy into a large stone outcropping. Howard, attempting to stop the onslaught of the past, drank more deeply from her mug. Uncaring for her mental state, the memory surged forth anyhow. Blank white rooms, the distinct tang in the air of antiseptic and medicines and metallic devices. That unnaturally slow, overly concerned voices of caregivers, and the saddened and hesitant ones of family. The soul-tearing grief of learning that her friends had all been too close to the blast to survive. The still raw memories of slowly, piece by piece, being physically reassembled into a semblance of a functional Ralph. The bitter flavor of knowing that it was only a twist of luck that had pushed her out of harm's way by launching her into the worst physical harm she had ever known. The gravel that seemed to catch in her voice box every time she tried to sing or speak, which had caused her to become all but mute in her sorrows. Oh, the marvels of modern medicine had allowed her body to be rebuilt at an astonishing degree, but never again would her arms and legs obey her desires of motion within the freedom and ease she once had. Her career and her future, the very essence of the person Howard had once been, had gone up in smoke, vaporized, just like the rest of her poor squad. To utterly numb herself and her sorrows by drowning her insides in alcohol, but found that her mug was empty. Howard had steeled herself for a possible confrontation between herself and the new proprietor of the establishment. He didn't know her well enough to know that she knew her limits. But before she could bring herself to raise an awkward limb to flag him, a commotion elsewhere caught her eye. The old jukebox, the relic of a distant past of some other species, had sat neglected in the corner of the room as far back as she could remember. Allegedly, it was able to play music of some sort, but to Howard's knowledge, the machine had never worked. It was too heavy for the proprietor to simply cart away into the junkyard, and too complex and unknown for the local technicians to even attempt repairs. There was an open, ongoing offer of free drinks for any being who could manage to get the darn contraption, however briefly, to state of functionality. On occasion, a plucky bar-goer would wander up to it and attempt to make it work, but neither with the correct tools or sober wit, nor the poorly aimed kick born of mind-twisted inebriation, had anyone achieved anything more than a soft bleeping and a brief flicker of colorful lights. Today, a cluster of beings that she had never before seen had entered the bar, instantly crowding around the old device. Their murmuring tones in a language she didn't share seemed to speak of surprise and joy and reverence all at the same time. She shrugged, mentally wished them luck, and turned back to the task of getting another round. The Rav had all but forgotten them when, halfway through the fresh mug, the impossible happened. The dusty machine in the corner bleeped softly and whirred to life. Howard turned and openly stared, marveling first at the brightness of the colored lights, then at the way they shifted through hues in a way that was somehow both obnoxious and soothing. The other beings, tall, strong-looking people who had just performed this feat of engineering, celebrated their victory with a strange little dance, unmindful of the slow approach of the other curious patrons. The newcomers clustered around the jukebox and began discussing something. The discussion grew louder and louder. Howard had never heard anything akin to their language, but after a few repetitions and variations on the base theme, it was clear that they were beginning to argue between a handful of options. Before things really got out of hand, one of the numbers spotted something else in the machine, uttered a cackling that Rav fervently hoped was laughter, and pressed the button. A flicker of light near her mug caught Howard's attention, and she reluctantly looked away from the slow, mesmerizing rainbow of the jukebox. Some long-ignored panel had lit up on her tabletop. Translate lyrics? Sheer curiosity prompted Howard to quickly select the affirmative, only briefly wondering just how long ago this particular translation matrix had been made, before the long-fabled musical capabilities of the jukebox slowly unveiled itself. Words began to scroll across the panel, providing a real-time translation. "We shall cry out when we are victorious," the strange voices proclaimed. Something about their tone seemed oddly distant, as though coming from afar. "We shall cry out," they repeated, and suddenly it was as though the caliber of voices snapped into a clearer auditory focus. "I've been caused to fall, but again I shall rise. Never will you cause me despondency." The tone of the singers was firm, resolute, defiant even. It was almost like a call to action. But Howard dismissed the thought as she reached for her mug. Such strength no longer resided within her. The words reappeared, the lyrics repeated, with no lessening in the urgent tone of the voices. Again, it called to her, and again Howard struck them off, deliberately squashing even the tiniest rays of hope and cheer that dared to surface within her, as she had done many times before. Again the lyrics cried out to her, urging her to stand up, to rise from where she had fallen, to shake off her sadness. But she could not. She must not. Her squad mates would not want her to cease mourning, to find joy where they could not. Would they? As the words repeated for a fourth time, calling out to Howard with the same emotional ferocity they had begun with, she began to wonder at how an unfamiliar song from an unfamiliar species could possibly be speaking so directly to her. "Rainfall causes the darkness to depart," the words suddenly read, the new lyrics delivered in a more soft and cajoling manner. Had the singer changed? They sang again, repeating the brief statement, but try as she might, Howard could not quite fathom what this might mean. "The man partakes of water of life, and of little water, and of liquid bread, and of wassail," one of the original voices seemed to say. So many beverages listed, but what were they? She didn't even know if they mattered. The man chose songs that hearkened to pleasant moments. Pleasant moments. It had been a long while since she had one of those. The thought dimly dawned on Howard that the sadness she carried was, perhaps, weighing her down. When had she last sung anything? The man chose a song to hearken to preferable moments. All the preferable moments were in the past. Everything that was good in her life had ended. She breathed deeply, trying not to let how much realization hurt show on her face. The softer-sounding singer called out repeatedly for a young man named Daniel, her heart broken. Bidden by the song that seemed to know herself better than she did, she remembered Daniel, sweet, small Daniel, squadmate, friend. The tiny glimmer that might have grown into something more than friendship had the awful calamity never occurred. Then, stronger than before, the call of the singers began anew. "I've been caused to fall, but again I shall rise. Never will you cause me despondency." Again and again the words came, pushing against the mental barriers Howard had placed to protect herself against the sheer pain of feeling. She could sense them, the unknown people, calling out to her to change herself, to open up, to live again. Howard, for a long time, had not wanted that. To live was to be in pain. To be in pain was to grieve. To grieve was to hold the memory of her fallen friends with her, clutching the hollow, heavy stone of sadness to her chest, like a lifeline and a curse, a burden and a comfort. To let go of the sadness that had become a natural part of her felt like letting go of her squad's memory. If she chose to open up, as the singers urged her to, it would hurt in a different way. It would let the jagged truth of her experiences wash over her, let the loss solidify into aching veracity, and then bring about a sense of healing. She would lose the constant aching reminder of her grief, and her squad deserved better than to be forgotten. She wanted to keep their sadness that was hers alone to bear. The men of medicine had rebuilt her body, but had completely ignored her shattered mind. The men of song came and lay psychic salve where they could, draining away the inflamed despondency of her mental wounds. "Rainfall causes the darkness to depart," the softer voice called out to her, and as tears began to pour from her eyes, she felt herself begin to understand. To hide sorrow within is to cause the darkness to remain. Unleash the pain, feel the sadness, and let it all be lessened. Rainfall causes darkness to depart. She wiped the wetness from her eyes as best she could, not wanting to miss any of the beauty of song. The man partakes of water of life, and a little water, and of liquid bread, and of a sail. One of the singers chastised, and Hounded stared, then stared at her drink in disgust. She was drowning herself in her sorrows in alcohol, just as, she assumed, this person had. It was the wrong choice for them, and, just as surely, it was the wrong choice for her as well. The man trills songs that hearkened to pleasant moments. The man trills songs that hearkened to preferable moments. Yes, she should be like the man. She should dare to sing once more, voice rising and soaring like the Rav she had been, like the Rav she still was. Her body may have been broken and rebuilt, but the essence of Hounded would always remain. She needed to go home soon, she decided. Go home and face everyone who worried about her. Go home and sing her gratitude and apology and continuing sorrow. Go home and sing of her squad mates, that they may be remembered. Weep not on my behalf, nearby resident, the softer voice chided, and Hounded understood. It was a tragedy that happened to those she had been close to. But there were only so many tears that one could shed over such an event. To forget the joys, well, that was unbecoming of their memory. And it was forgetting the joys that had turned her into what she had become when she had walked into the bar. She would be leaving as a changed Rav. I've been caused to fall, but again I shall rise. Never will you cause me despondency. The words repeated, and repeated, and repeated. And the lines we shall cry out when we are victorious, and rainfall causes the darkness to depart, move in and around them. A three-part braid-making, a tapestry of meaning and sound that left Hounded openly weeping unashamedly. Through wet and blurred vision, as the song that had healed her more completely than the doctors had managed slowly faded out of auditory existence, she read, untranslatable. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.